Well, we're not sure. We know we have a few people on the call today, and hopefully we get more. I put it out a couple of personal emails too, to some people that I know, like in resort here in Silver Star, that were struggling with insurance stuff. So, yeah, like we'll see what we get. But it was a hot topic of conversation in the roundtables. We were at,
Yeah,
yeah.
I bet, especially with the ski resorts, I'm quite well versed in dealing with some of these risk management companies because they are making things really difficult for some of the small medium sized operators right now with what they're requiring everybody to carry.
Well, and that was actually more the conversation was like say in Quesnel and in the Caribou Chilcotin was smaller operators with like little lodges, and that it all kind of ties into the rebuilding and like if there is a wildfire or an emergency, but also like that sort of risk management of like taking the and I'm not an insurance expert obviously, but like taking it on yourself compared to
Mm,
then like your business and then having to self-insure, and that was a big part of the conversation too.
right. Yeah, yeah. No, there's I know I don't know if you guys are. I do a lot of stuff with operators who are on Whistler and Sun Peaks and things like that. And the problem we're running into is Vail Resorts is coming in for a lot of these mountains now, and they're like imposing their U.S. insurance risk management requirements on Canadian operators, and they don't always speak the same language, and they always seem to have much more over the top insurance requirements that really aren't stuff we see on standard policies here. And that's kind of it's funny this comes up now for you guys. I've been having this conversation probably the last 3 months with multiple clients of ours, and I've actually been on the phone with the director of Sun Peaks. Sorry, my other line's right.
Hmm. Oh, yeah,
Uh-oh.
he'll come back. I know. Oh, well, I'll navigate. Yeah, so I threw together that post last night and I was like, trying to like, I knew it was like that. It was about 80% on brand. I was like, and I was trying to throw together also that Google form to get the message out to the WTA membership. So it was just like an extra sort of power hour of work after the board meeting and after my head was already full from the panel yesterday.
No. So I will hang in here for a while just to make sure everything is up and running. And then
Okay.
I have to step away by 12:30.
Yep.
So
That sounds good. Yeah, and I'm the host, so it should be fine.
I'll turn you over. You're a co-host right now, but I'll turn you over to make sure you're a host. So
Okay, awesome. And then yeah, and then I'll get you this before the end of the day today, that sort of revised.
no
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything else for the e-news that I can think of, but that was, and I don't know if Walt's still doing a CEO message and this is like below it, whatever his take is, he just
No,
wanted to include it.
he's in flight right now, so I'm sure he'll send me something by the end of the day. But it's going to be a full one because we've got the registration launching this afternoon. The monitor.
Yes.
There's a few things, and then of course the budget stuff. So yeah,
Yeah, and I reposted the survey on my own LinkedIn too this morning.
Megan.
LinkedIn on my own LinkedIn, like the survey link, just to help push it out.
Oh, the monitor link. Okay.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I was gonna say, Garrett, we did an engagement in Kamloops a few weeks back, and well, Colin from Tourism Sun Peaks was there, but I'm on the TOTA board with Aaron McDonald at the resort. But they lost a couple of their smaller operators that just decided that the insurance stress, and one of them it was the what is it like? It's like the sit ski. The name's escaping me. We had it in Whistler too, but it was kind of like the folks that move the people around in sort of a sit ski scenario.
Oh, okay, yeah, like almost like a wheelchair style ski, and then they have
Yeah,
the yeah. I've seen those. Yeah, so that was a company that was offering those kind of like tours on the ski hill.
yeah, and then they also decided it was just too onerous with the requirements of Sun Peaks Mountain Resorts. Yeah,
Yeah, I know.
but
I've had the same conversation with them a few times. Like the $10 million liability requirement is coming up more and more often, and some of these guys, I'm like, what sort of like history do you guys have of claims being this high? Like, where is this coming from? Because I've been in insurance for 13 years now, and we've never seen a claim come across any of these operators for like a lawsuit for personal liability. So I'm surprised to see that 5 million is not cutting it these days, and they want to see the 10 million. But there's also a bunch of other stuff I've seen them slowly been adding to their insurance requirements, which, if anything, to me just seems more of a money grab. Like it's not something that we see claims on. It's not something that our clients make claims on, but it's just stuff that the risk managers are like, oh no, you need to have this on your policy. You need to pay extra for it, and you're probably never going to use it.
Well, hi, Sandy. Nice to see you. How are you today?
Good, good. Thank you.
Good. So, and Sandy and Garrett, that introducing you two, and then the other couple people on the call so far. Well, these are all WTA board members, Brianne, Jamie, and Gina. And Gina, I know, works with you, Sandy, so you're close.
Hi, Sandy.
Hi, Gina. Hey.
Garrett and I are well acquainted.
Hi, Garrett. There you go.
Great
I was going to say,
background.
yeah, that's great, Bree.
Thanks. Come to base camp with us. You're going glamping right now.
Very nice.
I love it. We'll see how many we get. I put it out. I did like a quick, after our board meeting last night, like a kind of Canva post, and we threw that up on the Instagram files, and as well as I personally emailed all the WTA members. And yeah, I sent it out to a couple of colleagues too that I know have had, particularly in the event side, some struggles too. So we'll see. Probably maybe we'll give it like a couple minutes after 12 too to let people get in. It's a beautiful day out there. I don't know how it is in the lower mainland or on the island, but here in, I went out and just took a little walk around the yard and I was like, oh, it's very nice. The sun feels good because I think snow is coming like tomorrow or the next day.
Nice and squash.
Well, no, I'm in Coldstream still, Sandy.
Oh, you're up there. All right.
Yeah. So yeah, we've stayed here for this few years, and we'll sort of see where things go. But yeah, it's a beautiful day.
It's so beautiful down here. It's pretty well. When it's raining here, it's snowing somewhere, which is good news.
Is it? So it's raining down there in the, yeah.
Yeah, same on the island.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I really miss the coast, but I will say, like today, I was like, oh, it's quite nice. Like it makes me, it made me feel like maybe going camping. I could pop out into the trailer in my driveway.
Nice.
Let's see. I'm hopeful that we get folks, because it was really like a big topic of conversation. And I put it out like when we were in the engagement sessions in Quesnel and some of the other spots in Prince George, because that, yeah, we heard it come up consistently as the biggest issue for the smaller operators.
Well, and I know I've had a few folks, sorry, messaging me right now, just saying, will there be a recording? And I said yes, because there's folks who just can't get it.
That sounds good. Yes, we absolutely have it recorded. Well, maybe do a quick hello just from, Bree, go first, and just so you say who you are for Sandy and Garrett, who you said you know Garrett well.
Yes. Sorry, so I'm Brianne Quesnel, owner and operator of Spirit of the West Adventures on Quadra Island. And we have been in business for 24 years, so seen a fair number of changes over those years, or been part of the ownership structure for about 24 years. And currently Garrett is managing our insurance file for us. And yeah, I've been part of the WTA forever.
Nice to meet you, Brianne.
And we'll just, we'll do a round of hello since we're waiting. How about you, Gina?
Hi, Garrett. Yeah, I've met Sandy a couple of times, I believe. Well, not in real life, no IRL yet, but online. And so in my role as executive director for BCROA, I know Jody Elliott, who also works with Echo, very well. She's been my broker for 20 odd years, 25 or so. And so she recently switched over to Equa, and I just followed her. And then been really, really pleased. So we've engaged Equa for BCROA as well as the Alberta Association, which is PROA. And there's just been really fantastic, really open and collaborative, and really wonderful to work with. So
Here, thank you.
Yeah, so you guys are great.
Thank you.
And Jamie, I'll have you do a quick hello too.
I'm Jamie Boulding from, I guess, the president of Strathcona Park Lodge and Outdoor Education Center. We do guide training through Colt as well. So we have, it's always a topic trying to find the right deal on insurance and not having it going up and all the things we do or don't do or decide to, depending, talking to our good advice from insurers over the years. But it's always a changing market and trying to find the right group match that they sort of understand our market. So it's always interesting to hear what's going on.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Jamie. Nice to meet you.
And Kathy.
Hi, I'm Kathy McRae, and I'm the VP Vice President of Government Community Relations for Alterra Mountain Company's Experiences Division. So that's Canadian Mountain Holidays and Mike Wigley heli skiing. I've been on the WTA board, gosh, I think since 2017, and I'm currently the president. I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say.
Great. And maybe, well, let's see, we don't have, I was hopeful we would get more people. I've been messaging it out in all networks, but let's, yeah, Sandy, why don't you go ahead and give a little bit of overview of yourself? And I've known Sandy, full disclosure, I worked for Sandy's lovely wife, Joanne, for years and partner of their company in Whistler. And so I've known him personally. And he also did a fantastic session on insurance at the Mountain Bike Tourism Association conference when it was back in Silver Star a few years ago. So I know it's a hard topic to make fun, but I honestly thought that was one of the best sessions at that MBTA conference. Yeah.
You will be entertained, Cassandra, let me tell you. Thank you for the introduction. That's great. Yeah, I'm Sandy Miller. I'm a managing partner with Equus Specialty Risks. And we are a Canadian insurance brokerage, and we are specialized in a few different areas, one of which is sport, recreation, outdoor adventure, tourism. So we do a lot of work with backcountry lodges, with in the heli skiing, cat skiing, with mountain bike, as Cassandra mentioned, river rafting, of course, as Gina mentioned, and others. And the common thread through a lot of those risks is the waiver, is a waiver program. And the obviously our topic today is insurance. So the affordability and sustainability and ongoing access to coverage for a lot of these type of operations where there is inherent risk is really hinges on the success of the waiver program. It's changed quite a bit, and we can get into that during the conversation here. But yeah, there's been on the one hand, certainly lots of headwinds on insurance for WTA members and others. And on the other hand, there is some good news. We have seen some positive changes in the markets, and we can talk about those and how they've changed and why, and how we can maybe capitalize on those and you know, continue to make things a little bit better. So yeah, I've been at this for a long time. This is my 24th year. I have to do that by checking my kids' birthdays, because I always reference those, the connection there. And then prior to that, I worked in the Canadian ski industry. I'm still quite involved, obviously, on the insurance side, but also actually I'm going to Lake Louise in a couple of weeks for course conductor training for Canadian Ski Instructors Alliance. So still involved on that side of things, and which is great fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, my oldest kiddo just got his level 1. Well, it's already been a bit, but this is his first year as he'll be a ski pro. So
Great.
yeah. And Garrett, and we're very grateful to Garrett because he's been a great partner to WTA and has been a sponsor of the organization. So yeah, so there we go. We've got another one coming in. And yes, as Deb said, we've got this recorded, so we'll also share this out. I probably won't do as formal of like the Q&A because I know a lot of the folks on this call, but there's a lot of topics that have come up in the conversations over the last few weeks. And so I know we'll get into those areas. But yeah, I'll let you go ahead, Garrett. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Garrett Hartley. I've been with Sea First Insurance for 13 plus years, but as of November 1st, Sea First, which was previously the largest independent brokerage on Vancouver Island, has now merged with Navicord, which is a national insurance company. With this merger, they also incorporated Waypoint Insurance and Brown Ridge from the mainland, and we are now the second largest brokerage in Canada after these mergers. So even though with all these changes that have happened, we still have the same core Sea First team. So a lot of business is going to be as usual, other than signage and changes. I have personally been running our Adventure Guard program for the last 10 years. I created this with the original Sea First president, Doug Strong, who is an avid whitewater kayaker, heli skier. He's at Mike Wigley's every winter, probably more than some of the guides are. For a 70-year-old man, the guy can do adventure with the best of them. I have a hard time keeping up with him. Our program originally had been focused for guided outdoor operator activities. So we do a lot of kayaking, canoeing, paddleboarding, whitewater rafting, mountain biking. We do zip line tours, even as small as walking tours. But with this merger, we are trying to expand our program, and I've had some meetings with a few of the smaller ski lodges, ski resorts, and things like that. So this is definitely a program that we're looking to grow into some of the more larger spaces, maybe riskier areas. But so far, yeah, we've had a great job at keeping our adventure program kind of stable in terms of pricing and coverages and things like that.
Thanks, Garrett. And I'll start with you then with the first question, because this has been the largest one that's come up, is that the rising cost of the insurance. I mean, what I've heard from a lot of the operators I've been chatting with over these first few months and recent weeks was that insurance is doubling and tripling in cost for them. So what do you think are some of those main factors that are creating these rising costs?
So first and foremost, I think the biggest issue right now is we're seeing a lot of U.S. risk management companies and coming into the space and start playing a role with a lot of the ski resorts or bigger ski lodge areas and starting to impose their insurance requirements. And this isn't something where it's our rates are going up. It's them coming back to you and going, oh no, $5 million isn't enough liability. You need 10 million. And you need all these other extensions and other bits of coverage. So it seems like they're adding in a lot of extra requirements for these small operators that they maybe don't necessarily need. And it is more just driving up the cost of their insurance and making it tough for these operators to keep those costs down if there's no option for them to opt out of these new requirements. As I mentioned before, our Adventure Guard program has kept pretty stable rating for the 10 years that we've ran it. We haven't seen a big increase or decrease. I know we have a few clients who are members here, but for the most part, our rates have stayed pretty stable. I know kind of 2019 to 2024 was what we refer to as a hard market in the insurance industry, which does mean there are less players in the insurance market to provide quotes, which does cause the rates to go up when there's less people in the market. But as of 2025, we are starting to see the market soften. We're seeing new players come back in who are willing to quote on these, and that should help kind of keep the costs more competitive and hopefully drive the rates down a little bit for this year and hopefully the coming years.
Okay. And Sandy, what's your kind of take on that? Because I'd say like where I've heard this most too has been more in the interior too, with like some of the operators in the Caribou Chilcotin, up in Valemount, Blue River. Do you have some comments? Because I know Helicat, they said they've got it pretty dialed with their membership, but I think it's a lot of those other lodges, fishing lodges, more adventure guides.
Yeah, so I'll comment on a couple of things. The first, we haven't actually seen that, and that to hear that rates have tripled, doubled, or tripled is pretty surprising. That's not been our experience, and we have several hundred clients in the space. So I would say that's kind of unique circumstance. Generally speaking, I think Garrett alluded to it. The markets have softened. I referred to some of the good news that we have seen over the last little while with rates softening on property where on a more remote, unprotected property where we're seeing rates of north of $1 per $100 of insured value, which is the key. That's the magic number that the property underwriters put out there. That rate is coming down. We're seeing in 50, 60, 70 cents, depending on the risk. So there has been some softening there. On the liability side, claim experience has not been great. So I'm talking across the industry generally, whether it's ski, outdoor adventure, mountaineering. There have been some really large watermark cases where the damages have been, the initial claims and damages have been enormous, and in many cases exceeding the limits of the insurance available. And and I'll comment on what Garrett was saying about the higher limits being requested by many of the ski resorts. A third-party operator coming on property is bringing an exposure that the host resort has to account for somehow. Okay, so if there's inadequate limit to cover the cost, the host ends up picking up the rest. So that's what they're trying to cover over there. But what we're seeing in terms of claims, which really drive premium, is that there's been a lot of inflation in claims. There's no question. There was a famous case recently from Smithers, I believe, where a woman suffered a broken ankle in the parking lot of a 7-Eleven, sued 7-Eleven, and for a broken ankle was awarded over $900,000. It's a relatively minor injury. Nobody'd wish a broken ankle on anybody, but that's not the number that that would come to mind when you think about a claim for a broken ankle. That's the sort of inflation of claims that we're seeing. Crazy numbers for anything involving any allegation of a head injury or something like that. We're seeing $1.5 million to $2 million initial claims. Not saying there's any merit to them, but that's what has to be dealt with on the claim side. So insurance is it's a simple business. Money comes in with premiums and interest income. It goes out and claims at admin cost. Pretty simple model. And when claims, exceed premiums, then there has to be a right sizing of that. On the good news, like I said, we seem to have still accessibility of coverage. Markets are still willing for a price at times to cover more remote, unprotected properties. I was involved with a project over the past summer with a technology application on Savory Island, actually, next door to you, Brian, next door to Quadra. And we have actually gone ahead, speaking as a homeowner there, with installing an AI-driven smoke detection system and fire detection system. And these types of technologies are being rolled out, and they're not going to result in lower insurance premiums and fire premiums, but they may ensure sustainability of coverage, availability of coverage over the long term in some of these more remote properties.
That's great to hear. Garrett, do you have any thoughts about how small and seasonal operators might be able to better demonstrate their responsible risk management?
So actually, I've been jumping on calls with a couple of my smaller operators to speak with the directors of some of these resorts. So a few weeks ago, I was speaking to Sun Peaks director, and it just seems like to me there's maybe a little bit of miscommunication between the resorts and all of the operators. I understand where Standy's coming from with regards to maybe higher risk operations requiring a 10 million liability policy. But some of them I seem to be seeing these requirements come as just like a blanket request without actually diving into what that individual operator is actually offering. So for example, the Sun Peaks one, they offer snowshoe tours, walking tours, and paddleboard rentals. All very minimal risk exposure. They don't go on the ski runs. They don't go on the lifts or anything. It's just around the town of Sun Peaks and outside. And because they're contracted with Sun Peaks, they require the same 10 million liability that the ski school would have to carry. And it's things like this where we start to see additional costs to these operators where they probably would never have a claim go over $5 million for a snowshoe incident or something like that. But on top of the 10 mil liability, we're seeing other requests for non-owned auto liability, employer's liability, which is not something we see a lot of in BC because we have workers' compensation, medical expense coverage with higher limits. So I've noticed to see like not only more coverages, but higher limits. So what I've been trying to do is to push back on some of these, and I have been successful with a few of our operators in getting some of these requirements waived by Sun Peaks, because after we discuss it and explain it to them, they understand that maybe these aren't required for all the operators. If you're not doing passenger transportation, you don't need a $10 million non-owned automobile liability requirement. So I think a lot of those options for the smaller guys, actually reviewing what things you're offering, maybe having a discussion with the resort and not just kind of blanketing it all under the same kind of heading and being like, oh, you run a business here, you need to have the same liability that, you know, the ski resort has or whatever. I think looking at it on a more individual basis would definitely help. I think there's, you know, good merit to that stuff when you're looking at higher risk activities, things like the helicopter, heliski operations. Yeah, those are a little bit riskier. Motorized operations, snowmobiles, ATV tours, things like that. Definitely those can be, you know, higher risk, higher claims ones. But for some of these smaller guys who are doing paddleboard rentals, you know, that is really hurting them having these insurance requirements. So definitely reviewing these on a case-by-case basis and seeing if there's any wiggle room with the resorts is in my opinion has been a good idea and beneficial for our clients.
Thanks for that. Sandy, any other thoughts on that in terms of some of the clients you work with? I know in the rafting space and like guide outfitters, some of those smaller lodges and operators.
It's important to separate third-party liability, commercial general liability, and property, because those are the two primary policies that most operators will place. There'll be other things like pollution liability if you have fuel storage tanks and things like that, cyber liability. But I'll talk to fire property insurance, because that's a big driver for the remote properties. Wildfire is the number one concern. It's the number one topic of discussion with every underwriter out there. Obviously we only need to, you know, look around every year and see the experience in British Columbia and across Canada to see why underwriters are so concerned about it. The insured losses have been in the tens of billions of dollars in North America for wildfire. So this absolutely is number one. A lot of properties, how do you help with this? Well, the number one question is not so much pricing, it is about accessibility and availability of coverage. Again, this is why we went down this path on Savory Island with a technology application to help to go towards sustainability and the ongoing access to coverage. We're not in a situation where that developed in Los Angeles, where the fire hazard became so high that many insurers refused to cover a lot of the properties down there. And that was front page news that State Farm Insurance and others had lapsed policies, left a number of, you know, hundreds of thousands of families and businesses uninsured. They took a lot of heat for that, but the fact was that their analysis showed that the fire was inevitable. It wasn't a question of if it would burn, it was 100% when it would burn, and it proved to be accurate. Of course, we know what happened with thousands of properties damaged and billions of dollars of losses. When it becomes inevitable that a property will burn, it's no longer an insurance problem. we don't have insurance for these inevitabilities. Therefore, the insurance is for accidents. We're not there in British Columbia with properties yet, although we're certainly seeing some insurers become much more selective about where they'll, if there is a wildfire exposure, they won't touch it. Others are becoming more stringent in requiring a really well-developed fire management plan, fire response plan, both from internally inside the building and also a wildfire. Fire Smart programs like Fire Smart, where there is funding available to remove fuel around the perimeter of a building, to look at exterior materials, building materials, steel roof, non-combustible siding materials, move combustibles like firewood, for example, away from a building. These types of things, and there are lots of resources available through FireSmart and others on how to make your property better. Landscape materials is another one. It's one of the lessons that came out of Fort McMurray was it was a very fast-growing community. The areas where there had been plant works planted that were fast growing and would make a new neighborhood more attractive more quickly were planted with non-native pines, for example, and very flammable materials that really accelerated the progression of the fire. So these are the kind of things that have to be considered and should be part of the package when you're working with your insurance broker to allow them to tell the story about all of the good things that you're doing to manage the risk.
I was going to say, in your experience, when the operator is better able to tell that story, has it typically resulted in better coverage or lower premiums?
I wouldn't say lower premiums necessary, possibly. I mean, if we're pushing for lower premiums, it'll be vital to have that information, to be able to make that case. We have to be factual and accurate in our description of the risk to the underwriters. Just be clear, our role is as an intermediary. We're not the insurance company. We don't. Our companies don't put up the millions of dollars to guarantee the insurance contracts. We're intermediaries and we work for our clients. So our job is to advocate on behalf of the clients. Do we see lower premiums? Maybe sometimes. I'd say, again, lower premiums are good. I totally respect that insurance premiums are a big budget item in most operators' finances. Totally respect that. It is, you try and manage as best you can, make sure that you're using the resources that are available. Maybe we can talk about waivers and go back to liability in a moment, and some of the requirements there and how that's changed. But on the property side, I'd say absolutely take advantage of FireSmart and other resources that are available in your communities.
Awesome. And before we get into waivers, I'll ask you too, Garrett, is there anything on sort of the sufficient coverage for rebuilding or for business interruption? Because that was part of the conversations too, where people have, ended up with those losses. And I've heard about some cases with incidental issues too, with some events. Any other kind of topics that would help ensure that they've got the sufficient coverage in those cases?
Yeah, so a big one I would say is building appraisals. I think one of the biggest issues we're running into in the insurance market on the property side right now is buildings being underinsured with the amount of increased inflation, labor costs, material costs, everything like that, plus the amount of time sometimes it is to find a contractor to build this. And if you're going to a remote location, it makes it 10 times worse. So having a building appraisal that shows you what the actual current cost to rebuild those structures, including the debris removal. So if we're hauling, 20 dump trucks full of burnt down material out of a rural location, that price is expensive as well. So that building appraisal is going to give you a current value that you should be insuring these buildings for, so we don't run into those issues of the buildings being underinsured where you get hit with a co-insurance penalty, you may not get your full claim payout, or you may be just with insufficient coverage, and now you've got to make up the extra $1 million, $2 million, $3 million that you were underinsured out of your own pocket to rebuild one of these structures that you've got. So I'm a big advocate of the building appraisals. Obviously, you want to have proper business interruption coverage as well on your policy, especially if you guys can't set up, let's say, a temporary location. Like if you're doing rentals and we can rent you, a trailer, and you can do your equipment rentals or whatever from another site, so you're not completely down. That's a way of, not being without any revenue income when we get these repairs done. So having a business interruption or an extra expense coverage on here was definitely help you guys either get back up and running so you can offer some sort of activities to generate income, or if we don't at all, at least you have full business interruption coverage should you not be able to operate at all for the full season. So looking on your policies and seeing what the limit is in terms of the time frame. Is it a 12-month policy? Is it a 24-month business interruption policy? Because some of this stuff could easily take more than 2 years to rebuild. And then also, what is the limit? Is it a dollar value? Some people offer a actual loss sustained business interruption coverage, which means there is no limit. We base it off what your gross annual revenue is. So yeah, all those would, I think, be very beneficial to review, have a good understanding of it, and include on your insurance policies.
Awesome. Yeah, go ahead, Gina, you've got a question. It's meant to be a flowing conversation. So yeah, jump in and then I'll get into waivers after that.
Sure. So this would be to either Sandy or Garrett, or both, ideally. So I know what's come up a lot with in my role has like I'm benefiting from getting kind of new and current information in these types of meetings. But I think that there's been a lot of changes in insurance and in procedures and kind of standards around waivers and how those are applied in the last, say, 5 years. And I understand that possibly that those changes have meant that some operators have a much greater exposure than they think they do. And then potentially what you've already kind of brought up is they're underinsured. And so that's kind of something that we're at BCRA, we've had some conversations about, like, how do we best communicate that to members? And I would think for WTA as well, that would possibly be a question, is kind of like, first, your comments on how accurate is that assumption that I'm making? And then also, do you have any suggestions as to how we can communicate that out to our members, and kind of how urgent of a problem is that?
Yeah, I'll jump on that. Goldie,
Gina, it's
Gina,
okay, it happens all the time.
Gina, I'm sorry. Yeah, there have been a lot of changes in the past 5 years. The whole waiver world has changed dramatically in the wake of two really pivotal cases, and we're starting to see claims now where plaintiffs have picked up on the vulnerabilities that were created with these cases and the key points that came out of them. And it is really it's put the emphasis, and we've talked about this, I'm sure you talked about it with Jody, and there are three components to a really good waiver program, to an effective waiver program. The first is the document itself. And there's a standard template. We work a lot with Robert Kennedy with Kennedy Romanek in Vancouver here. Robert has drafted the waiver wording that's used almost exclusively and across the ski industry with Canada West Skiers Association and Helicat, with a couple of exceptions. But that template for that wording has loads of support from courts, and claims going back 30 years. So make sure that you're working with a really good advisor on the waiver wording itself. That's step one. And frankly, that's the easy part. Step two is the administration of the program. The key point, and I think what you're referring to is the big change, is in order for that waiver to be enforceable, courts will insist that the waiver is signed prior to payment, including a deposit. We recognize that that introduces some real challenges for operators, that their systems are not set up to work for their workflow to go in that order. The other challenge is for multiple bookings. So you have a primary guest who books on behalf of several others. How do we get those waivers in it signed back in advance of payment? But the main principle here that's come out of these cases, the main one for reference is Apps versus Grouse Mountain, APPS, which is available publicly if you want to read through it. But this was the main sort of core message among a couple others. But the main one is that the thing must be signed and agreed prior to payment. And it does make sense if a person travels a great long distance to get to a river rafting operation, incurred a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of expense to get to the location, only to be presented with the waiver at that point saying, great, welcome, we're going to have a lot of fun, but before we do that, we need you to read and sign this thing. And you're like, wait, hold on, now you tell me? Right, that doesn't, I think none of us on the call would really feel very comfortable in that situation. It doesn't really pass the sniff test, so that's logical. The waiver must be signed and agreed prior to payment. There's practical implications of that, and we can get into that, but that's the main principle there. That's the second part, so the workflow. The third is supporting the waiver in multiple locations on the premises, but particularly on your website, which is really the storefront for most operators. There must be lots of visibility of the waiver associated with FAQs on safety and risk management, sections of the website associated with each product, each SKU, I guess you could say. There should be absolutely no question that the person, a guest, or anybody viewing the website would get past the section without seeing reference or the waiver itself. So what can we do? Those are the things. That is how a proper thing is managed. Get a good document, make sure the workflow is set up properly, it's in the right order, and third, support with on-premises signage and on the website.
Garrett, do you have any other ideas there?
Yeah, all good points. I agree that it's definitely the information on the waiver, but administering the waiver. So making sure all of your employees understand how to explain this to your guests. I go and do some of our excursions and don't always mention to the employees that I'm their insurance broker. And I do notice a difference between some employees who completely explain the waiver, explain to them, if you don't feel comfortable, you don't have to sign it. No one's forcing you to sign this waiver. No one's forcing you to go on this adventure activity. If you don't want to do it, that's fine. You don't have to. But then we get some employees who just go, all right, please just sign here. And then they don't explain it. And you know, somebody does their signature and we go off. Those are some of the issues that are going to happen if we do run into a claim that these waivers aren't going to stand up in court. So making sure your employees know how to properly administer them is definitely a strong requirement for you guys to make sure these work. We actually, as part of our Adventure Guard program, also provide a waiver form that is been done up with all the legal information and everything. And we provide it to our Adventure Guard clients so they can edit it and just reflect what their business name is, the activities they're offering. So we make sure that all of our Adventure Guard clients are using the same waiver format, and when that's been done by our legal team to give them the best chance in them holding up in court. On top of that would be the difference between having a minor versus an adult. Technically, you can't have minors sign waiver forms. So to kind of work around this, we have other forms called permission forms or risk assessment summaries, where we get a parent or guardian to read through these and sign on behalf of the minor themselves. Again, it may not hold up in court, but at least it's something that we have acknowledgement and a permission that these minor has been able to go on the activity, and they've read the inherent dangers and they understand what's going on. So yeah, just a few more ways of how to properly administer the waivers. We have a couple clients who actually go as far as having almost a life-size copy of our waiver form printed and at their retail operation. So you walk in and you're met with a 6 foot tall waiver, and you can look at that, read through that, as well as on their website. So you're definitely aware of what you're signing and why ahead of time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Gina, do you have any other questions there?
Yeah, so I guess to specifically address, like, do you feel that if operators aren't meeting these new standards in terms of waiver administrations specifically, that they are probably underinsured or have a liability exposure that they may not be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, if the waivers aren't being signed properly in the event of a court case, that's something that we would be able to have on our back end to be like, okay, well, we did sit down, we did go through this waiver, the client understands it. If it's not done properly, it's almost as helpful as having a blank piece of paper in there, right? If you go, well, they signed this and they go, well, I didn't read it, I didn't look at it, I understand what I was doing. You told me I just had to sign it before I could go on the river raft. Probably not something that there is going to make any difference in the court case. Not to say that a waiver done properly is going to 100% stand up in court anyway, but at least it's some ammunition for your side or for our defense's side when we do have to go to a court case in these unfortunate events. So yeah, having it in the right format, the right understanding, the right way of administering it all benefits you guys if you ever get dragged into one of those unfortunate court cases.
I'll just pick up on that. Gina, I think you used the term underinsurance on that.
Or, I mean, they're not interchangeable, I understand, but is it like increased liability exposure, right? That they're not even necessarily aware of. And so maybe I'm not understanding how those two terms relate.
The CGL policy would respond to defend the claim, whether there's a waiver in place or not.
Right. Okay.
It will respond to defend the claim. So they'll appoint a lawyer. The lawyer will potentially hire an adjuster. There might be experts involved, whether it's engineers or subject matter experts or whatever. If there's a settlement, if it does go to court and there's court awarded damages, all that stuff would be covered under the CGL policy. Now, having to actually defend a claim is a very expensive process. The purpose of the waiver is to deflect claims that are tied to inherent risk of the activity. There is inherent risk in river rafting. There is inherent risk in helicopter skiing. It's part of the reason why we sign up to do these things, is because it's fun, it's exciting. There is danger to it. The waiver is a vital piece of the risk management there, because we get those guests to agree that, hey, we spell out all of the hazards and the perils on the waiver. And we say that we very clearly, these are the potential things that could happen. And by signing this document, you agree to assume responsibility for yourself, and you're not going to sue us if something bad happens, right? So if we can get a claim dismissed based on the terms of the waiver, or even better, a plaintiff's lawyer looks at the waiver and says, you know what, this is a really good document. They've done it well. I'm not going to take this claim. I'm not going to take the next step to even take your case to make a claim against the operator. If we can get a deflection of a claim and prevent it in the first place, which has certainly happened lots and lots of times, that's the best case scenario. That's cheap, right? Versus if we in early stage in negotiations, even before litigation, to have a discussion with plaintiffs' lawyers about the value of the waiver. That if I can make it go away, if it's done properly, that's cheap. It gets expensive if the waiver is non-effective. Okay, there's a famous, very well-known case in the outdoor adventure world recently against a mountain guide and the Association of Canadian Mountain Guides. And many people probably know about the claim. I'll give you we can get into the circumstances, but it essentially, there was a climbing incident that occurred in the field, and the guest was not really very seriously injured, though his claim was based on the supposed PTSD that he suffered post-loss, that he had decreased earning capacity. He was a very high-earning accountant with KPMG, and there was a problem with the waiver administration. Both the plaintiff's lawyer and the judge in the first hearing said, great document, nothing wrong with the document. However, it was dated incorrectly. It was dated for day 1 of a 6 or 8 day engagement, and a loss incurred on day 7 of an 8-day engagement. But the waiver was only dated for date 1. Okay, so it was an administrative error that voided the waiver. All right, back to the drawing board. Then we have to defend the claim, and the costs just go astronomically high. And so we can avoid all that with a well-crafted waiver, administrative process, workflow, and support. As I said, if we can do that, it's way better. It's better for the insurers. I said earlier, simple math, premium in, claims out. More claims out, the more the premium's going up. So that's that. If there's an exposure, that's it, right? Is first of all your deductible amount, and secondly, ongoing premium increases if you do have a claim that's not defendable because of the waiver.
Good to know. Bree, did you also have a question there?
Yeah, can I follow up on a couple of quick points? And I think these will probably apply across the board, so hopefully it's helpful for anyone. Talking about the procedure, so having the waiver signed before any money is taken. We administer our waiver virtually the vast majority of times now. So we send it to folks in advance. They have time to review it. It's typically after a deposit is taken, so we'll have to review that procedure. But virtual signatures, sometimes people are typing one letter in, a period, a dot, and we're running into problems with the witness signature where they're signing the witness line. So our workaround has been when people arrive, we have them re-sign it in front of our staff. Any thoughts on that? And then can you expand on the dating? We run multi-day adventures. Typically people are signing the date that they are signing the form, had nothing to do with the date of their departure. So if you don't mind sharing a bit more on that, that'd be great.
Sure. A couple of things. First of all, digital waivers, absolutely. There's lots of case law. There's actually legislation in Canada that does confirm digital waivers. Digitally signed documents are fully enforceable. They're legal documents. We've been doing it with real estate transactions and many other legal documents for years. It's fully supported, no problem. A digital signature is enforceable. And in fact, there was a recent case that was contested on whether a thumbs up emoji in a text exchange represented agreement to a contract and conclusion of a contract. And the court found that, in fact, yeah, a thumbs up emoji was confirmation that the contract was completed. So that part is great. The witness on a digital signature, that's an artifact from the paper version. You can remove that from your digital version or black it out. There's no point in having a witness box on a digital waiver. Having it signed in advance of arrival, as soon as possible, hopefully before payment, is absolutely best practice. Doing a second paper waiver on site is really good, because, and we've seen this in 3 claims so far where a digital waiver was signed and as well as a paper copy. It's great to have a tangible piece of paper that the lawyer can stand up in court with and go, here you go, Exhibit A. The digital waiver is harder to present in court. And this is a vulnerability with a lot of these third-party waiver companies like Smart Waiver, Easy Waiver, and others. It's more difficult to present and to reproduce how the waiver was presented to the guest and how they signed, and did they get a copy of themselves, or all of that. That's a little tougher. But if you can get a paper waiver on site think of it like belt and suspenders, like you're doubling up. And part of the verbiage around that when introducing the waiver to those guests on site is like, you'll be familiar with this wording. You've seen it already with the digital waiver that we sent you and that you signed back to us. We'd like you to have a look at it again, and we need your signature, please, on the bottom of the paper. Right? It's a legal document. Blah blah blah. That part is a good practice. So definitely support that. As far as the dates, and this is as I said, this is where it went sideways with the Manson versus Mitchell and ACMG claim, was that the digital waiver only had a pull down for a single date. It didn't have an option for a date range. Waivers can be signed for a period of time. We do it all the time with seasons passes. For the 25-26 ski season, it would go from the time you purchased a ski pass in Mount Washington, for example, from say October 15th through till wherever. Maybe it's not going to work through the summer. They want you off. Maybe it's April 30th. Right. So there should be a date range on a field with the date range in your digital waiver and on your paper waiver as well.
Great. I want to make sure are there any other questions right now too for Sandy and Garrett before my last question was kind of on policy and a collaborative approach, but I want to ensure that if there's anything that we want to get covered, that you get a chance to raise your hand.
Can I ask one more question about how insurers are viewing certification? I work in an industry that has guide certifications that are kind of generally accepted as best practice. They're not legally required. They're not legally kind of reviewed. It's not a government-based program. There's different operators popping up with different kind of levels of certification, and there's worldwide standards and BC standards. And where does that level of certification and requirement kind of fit in what insurers are looking for, and case precedent that you've seen? Or that'd be my question, how it's all playing out certification wise.
I don't know, Garrett, if you want to handle it, I'm happy to jump on it. But
yeah, I was gonna say, we don't get too much into the weeds. Like, as long as we have whatever the BC equivalent is of the standard certification for your guides or whoever, that's acceptable from our side of things. I haven't seen much experience where having worldwide accreditation is going to give you any sort of discount on your insurance. I think they just want to make sure that these guides have the proper training and proper certification for the activities that they're offering. And as long as that is acceptable in BC or whatever province that you're operating in, from an insurance standpoint, I think that's all they're really looking to see.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to convey to is that there isn't necessarily a perfect standard. There's lots of different operators and different courses, and trying to figure out, well, what is it that they're looking for to be that BC equivalent when it's an unregulated industry?
Think of it this way. Flash forward to next summer, and you have a loss, somebody's seriously injured or worse, and 2 years down the road beyond that, there's a civil claim that comes back and it names your company, maybe the individual guide, as defendants. That claim is going to it'll have a very long list of allegations against company, all of the defendants. So it will go into great detail about all of the ways in which you breached your duty of care, which ties directly to negligence, but all the ways in which you breached your duty of care as an operator: failure to train, failure to supervise, failure to, poor communication practices, failure to identify the hazard, marking hazard, blah, blah, blah. And the guide around the allegations will be around certification, training, experience, oversight, supervision, poor decision-making, blah, blah, blah. So the claim, if you have an opportunity to look at a civil claim for an outdoor adventure company, I encourage you to do so. They're very informative. to reverse engineer and think, oh boy, how would I address each of those allegations, which you have to do. That's the defense lawyer's job. One of the first things that will come up if it's a guiding type incident is, tell me about your training, about your credentials, your professional development. Why are you qualified to do what you were doing on the day of the loss? And you have to be able to answer that. And if you have to answer that in the best way that you can. What's the standard against which the guide would be measured? Well, it's the industry standard. The Occupier Liability Act and the Negligence Act both say that what do we have to do? Well, the duty of care there, the bar, is to do what's reasonable. What would a reasonable person do in similar circumstances? So if peer organizations are hiring guides with similar types of qualifications, and if there's a range of different organizations, there isn't a single one. Like in the heli ski world, in the cat skiing world, CSGA and ACMG are the two primary ones, and then we see international guides occasionally with IFMGA and so on. It's a little different in the paddling world, but what's the industry standard? So be able to address that, and you'll be in good shape.
Awesome.
I just have a quick follow-up question to that. So when you have like some industries, rafting is not one of them, but like for example, fishing guides, they're often insured through a group policy through the association. And I know there's some of the outdoor industries who have like group insurance as averse to individual operator insurance. So how does that change in that circumstance? Like when you have a company that's insured through a group policy, how would that be different in terms of a company that's insured individually with their own policy?
Well, I think they're two different questions, Gina. So there are two different things. The insurance coverage itself is different from defending a claim. Okay, so in defending all of your safety practices, your risk management is built around, keeping people safe, guests, staff, and others safe, get them home safe at the end of the day. And all those things that you do become the industry standard. Some operators do it, and I'm sure and some better than others. Whether the operator is a member of an association or not, the insurance coverage shouldn't really vary all that much without knowing the specifics of what you're referring to. But in terms of defending the claim, the same standards would apply across the board for the association, any of the members.
Okay. I was just thinking,
Does that answer your question?
Like fishing guides are one of them. Horse outfitters are another one where they have a group insurance policy, so that their association membership also is how they get their insurance. Whereas like in rafting, you just go as an individual company and a corporation, and you get your insurance that way. So that's more of the question was: is there different implications?
Is there advantage one way or the other?
Or even just what are the implications?
Sometimes it's the scale, like an individual guide. It's hard for an individual guide sometimes who doesn't have the revenue or the volume of business to support a minimum premium. Even those are risky. It's risky business. I mean, there was a very well publicized, very expensive claim in the guide outfitting world a few years ago, and I'm not sure whether the waiver would have been even applicable if it hadn't been voided, but the waiver was voided because the guest had signed the waiver, the client had signed a waiver in year one that they were not successful in the hunt, and the guide felt badly about that. These are big dollar trips. The guide offered the client to come back the following year. He didn't re-sign a waiver for the second year, and there was an incident out in the field, and the client was killed. There was no waiver defense.
Okay, so it doesn't really have that much of an impact then.
The circumstances of that loss, like it probably wouldn't have been a waiver defense anyway. But
I would just say, going back to the group policy versus individual policy, maybe the only other difference you may run into is, even though it's a group policy, each claim is going to be handled on the individual company basis. And you could run into issues where if you have one or two operators in that group policy who have high number of claims and nobody else does, if you're part of that group policy, you may see those group rates increase due to no fault of your own. You could have no claims for 10 years, but some of the other members of the group policy have had 5 or 6 claims. That is either going to drive those group rates up, or in some cases, we've even seen those group policies basically implode, and they've said we've had to shut this down, and now each individual operator is going to have to go get their own insurance themselves rather than bundled up in a group policy.
Right. Okay, thanks. That's helpful.
Awesome. Well, we just have any final questions? I'm really grateful for the time. I thank both Sandy and Garrett for their expertise and their partnership and being members of WTA, and of course for the board members that are on the call. Jamie, you had gone off mute. Did you have a quick question too before we wrap up?
Oh, it was the real challenge of the certification that Brianna was bringing up about how we're quite careful in all our staff manuals and our training and our logging, how we do things, because there's just so many different categories of certification, and when you have a versatile business, are you really approved for nature walks or something? Make sure that you have to check everything else, because if you make sure you don't write in your manual that you're going to have mandatory, every person has this ticket, because it's very hard to deliver. Yeah. And you have to be careful that your in-house training is always adequate to allow programs to be delivered. If there's my advice on that over the years, because it would be impossible to say that if you can't actually check them off and evaluate their skills and make sure that they're up to it. Obviously, first aid or something doesn't matter, but it's amazing how many little categories of things you might, that don't have their stand-up paddling ticket. They're only a canoe person. You wouldn't, as long as you saw them on the stand-up paddling board and say, okay, that would be fine. I evaluated your other experience and your references, and I don't think we have to be careful what we put in manuals and in print.
100%. Yeah. We've seen several claims that have hinged on that, where there's a difference between what the manual says and practice. And they may be even talking about the same thing. You may do things in a different order. Just, you used to do it in ABC, now you do it ACB. Well, that creates a whole friction point. It gives an opportunity for a plaintiff's lawyer. So you're absolutely right, Jamie. Like, review your manuals, make sure that they're current, that they actually reflect what you're, not only what you want to do, but what you're actually able to do. So
awesome.
Great point.
Bree also asked about any cases that she should review in that point too. So what we'll do is we'll do some follow-up. I've got some great notes here, and we'll make sure the contact information gets out as well as the recording of the session. And then I'll send a note to Garrett and Sandy about any of those particular cases that our operators should be reviewing, so that they make sure that they're ahead of it. Thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate the time today, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
Guys.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon.
You too.